All right, you guys, we have a major transit alert. We are going to be talking today about Mars shifting into Gemini, where he's going to be for almost 3 months, June 20th, 2024, until September 4th, 2024. We'll talk about what this means for you, how it may impact things like your relationships, your energy levels, your communication. And the brilliant astrologer I have with me here today is also going to walk us through the zodiac signs so you can get a little bit more information about how this is going to impact you personally. And I don't mean impact like things are going to be happening to you. I just mean that there's going to be an energy that you can dance with, and there will be nuances based on your sun sign and rising sign. Michelle, will you be doing sun and rising?
I'll be doing the zodiac signs. So if you have a personal planet or important points in any of those signs, it may be applicable. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So just how you might dance with that specific energy and the kinds of themes that will be highlighted for you during this transit. So first and foremost, I need to thank you. I know that you have many options in the ways that you choose to spend your time. And the fact that you are choosing to hang out here with us to explore your connection to the universe, your role in the unfolding of time and space, and to use the astrological energies to be in alignment with your unique and particular path. This just makes me so happy. Thank you for being here and enabling us to do this work, and for enabling me to be able to introduce you to incredible astrologers like Michelle Dench. So I respect and admire Michelle so much. I've had some incredible readings with Michelle, as have so many of our community members. And many of you know Michelle. She is an intuitive astrologer. She serves as vice president of NCGR San Francisco chapter, and she specializes in goddesses in astrology, healing, and looking at relationship and family synastry in the birth chart. And Michelle, welcome back to the Astrology Hub podcast.
Thank you, Amanda. It's such an honor to be here.
All right. So let's talk about it. Mars and Gemini. What is it? Why is it important? Give us the scoop.
Right. Well, one of the things to keep in mind with Mars from an evolutionary perspective is that Mars transiting anywhere is pointing to the leading edge of our evolution, right? And I come at a lot of what I would do from the perspective that all souls are here to evolve and that we're in this constant state of growing. So when Mars moves into Gemini, what we're looking at is a shift into being motivated by independent thinking, right? And this comes with the desire to question everything that we may have been thinking for a long time. And I think this is significant because Mars is the ruler of the transiting North Node right now. So we've been working a lot this last year around who we are and what we desire to do with our lives and what the direction of our life is and where our thinking has been limited by the way that other people might expect us to be, or having done, kind of being a creature of habit. This transit will be, I think, a breath of fresh air in a way, because it'll be supporting this kind of deeper evolutionary growth that's encouraging us to move in a new direction already.
We also have Jupiter and Gemini at the same time. So this just seems like a lot of firepower in Gemini. How are those two working together, and how might that show up in our lives?
I think part of what's going to happen right away is the Mars transit begins literally the very first few days Mars enters Gemini with a trine to Pluto, which is kind of like the gas being accelerated behind our evolutionary journey. And then it's not very long after, I'll give you the dates exactly, that Mars makes its conjunction to Jupiter. So if you look at the larger cycle, Mars enters Gemini on July 20th. August 14th, Mars conjoins with Jupiter. And then the last part of the cycle is Mars squaring Saturn and then Mars squaring Neptune, right? So we have this sort of theme of energy that moves through the whole Mars cycle, which is like kicking off a new evolutionary cycle with Pluto, and then joining with Jupiter, who's going to be in the sign of Gemini for the next year. So it's an important transit because it's really wherever Jupiter is transiting, we get a Mars conjunction, every so often that kind of accelerates that growth. So it's like pouring fuel on our opportunities, which can be really amazing if we know what to do with that energy. And I think the Mars square Saturn is the kind of adjustment to wherever that might have gone overboard. And we'll have other adjustments that I can talk about during the whole Mars cycle. But then we sort of end this Mars cycle with a real clarifying transit, one that I think is going to bring full circle to our attention why we're doing what we're doing, right? Mars is about instinctual impulse. It's the desire that you have, that you just have. It's motivation. If you think about it, Mars is that energy that gets you up in the morning, and you use Mars energy along with Saturn and along with Neptune and along with Jupiter to create and expand things in your life. So we have all these energies kind of coming together during this transit that are, I think, influencing the way that Mars is working.
Fascinating. You mentioned Mars square Saturn. Mm-hmm. When is that happening?
The Mars square Saturn is August 15th, 16th. So it's within a few days of Jupiter squaring Saturn, and Jupiter follows Mars and squares Saturn right
Do you
after.
mean Jupiter conjunct? Wait. Wasn't Mars and Jupiter going to be conjunct?
Mars and Jupiter are going to come together.
Okay.
Mars will make the conjunction and then make a 90-degree angle to Saturn, who's in Pisces. And then because Mars is traveling faster than Jupiter, it takes a day or two later where Jupiter actually follows Mars and squares Saturn, makes the same aspect to Saturn. So
how would you interpret that storyline? That's an interesting sequence of events.
Yeah. Well, I think of Mars as that motivation and Jupiter as the opportunity, right? When motivation and opportunity meet, something can grow and really big, really quickly. And Saturn is the reality check. Saturn says, well, you have this great idea. Wonderful. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to work it out? How's it going to, Saturn is like, you get it really excited, okay, with Mars and Jupiter. You get this opportunity, you quit your job and you leave. And Saturn is your dad who says, well, then how are you going to pay the bills? You just quit your job before you started this company. You might have had a great idea, but if you didn't have the practical awareness of what skills or tools or requirements might be necessary, this could be not necessarily a bad thing, but a challenge that you'd have to overcome, right? A square reflects a challenging aspect. Mars square Saturn is giving us the opportunity to then say to all that Mars Jupiter energy, well, do we really want to do that? Is this really part of our dream? Is this really where we're going to put long-term energy? And if the answer is yes, then the Mars Jupiter conjunction would have given you the necessary boost to move in that direction with confidence, right? With decision making and will and authority is what comes in with Saturn, which says, okay, then do the work. Because if you want the thing bad enough, then doing the work is worthwhile. And this could be applied to anything in your life. If you think about it from the perspective of a relationship, right? Mars, Jupiter, you meet someone, chemistry flies, all of a sudden it's like, wow. And then you have your little first kerfuffle, right? And you fight, you have an argument or a misunderstanding or something. Do you want to continue to work out the relationship? Do you want to continue to build the relationship over time? If you do, then you'll have to do the Saturn work of repairing whatever that miscommunication was. You could apply this to work if you take on a huge project and then all of a sudden you realize, well, I might be in over my head. I might have been not as qualified as I thought when I volunteered for this job. But if you really want the work and the accolades, you'll cut your teeth. You'll figure out how to learn. You'll gather all the information that you need. You'll talk to all the people that you need to, and you'll take the time to put that energy that you had, which said, yes, here I am, into good use, right?
And what does the Gemini aspect of this bring into the equation? What kinds of Gemini things are impacted by it being Mars being in Gemini and Jupiter being in Gemini?
Great question. A couple of things to respond to that. Mars is going to be ruled, as it's in the sign of Gemini, by Mercury, who's the ruler of Gemini. And so then I think about, well, what is Mercury doing while Mars is in Gemini? This is a really important thing for us to understand because Mercury has to do with our thinking and learning and communication. It's the messenger planet, right? And everybody, when Mercury retrograde happens, blames Mercury for things breaking down, for things not working. Well, what's happening during this Mars cycle is Mercury retrograde. And
Ooh.
the entire Mars cycle is colored by this Mercury retrograde, which is a really interesting one because Mercury will first be retrograde. It'll station retrograde in the sign of Virgo. It's going to go back into the sign of Leo, and then it'll go back into the sign of Virgo, which is also another Mercury ruled sign. So the sort of double emphasis on how impactful our communication is during this time, right? How conversations can make or break things. And I say that with like a lot of sobriety, being that we can say things in an instant that cut people for years.
Mm.
We can do things with our words that we can be having to spend a long time afterwards repairing. So these are things, to be aware of. It also will, in the way that Mercury does breaks things down, I don't think of it as causative. I don't believe the planets are causative. My opinion is that they are reflective, as above, so below, right? It's reflecting the activities here on Earth. And so we can look at it and see, well, what is this reflecting? Why is this happening in my own life? And if we use it from that self-reflective place, Mars in Gemini with this retrograde period can be extremely valuable. Because when things break down in our lives, when conversations go wrong, when things that we functionally need in order to do our jobs, in order to have relationships, in order to live our lives, don't work functionally, it shows us almost in a way, it interrupts the pattern that we had been accustomed to. And it shows us what needs our attention. And if we give our attention to those things, if we figure out, okay, this pattern in my relationship has been breaking down. We've constantly had this same conversation struggle, right? At work, I've constantly had this same conflict with this person. And now all of a sudden it's coming to a head and it's bringing back around this past dynamic because Mercury, when it's in its retrograde, it's intensifying the soul's evolutionary intention. Often that's happening through bringing up the past. And when the past comes back, that's when I say, well, what are we going to do with that? How do we look at this? What do I want to change? Because what will happen with this Mars retrograde is if we can access that inner will and motivation, that desire to change, we might actually be able to find, wow, now when I talk to this person, I set an appropriate boundary. That would be the Saturn square, right? I set a boundary of how I want to be treated in this relationship. And I allow them in their freedom and they're in their free will to act in accordance with that boundary. But I hold myself in self-respect, in dignity, with a lot of care. And I'm careful with my words because I know I'm not wanting to cut them, but I'm wanting to cut off this pattern, right? So we can have a lot more awareness of these things, especially during the retrograde period, because of this internalization that's happening for us, right? Whenever soul growth gets to be intensified, when all the different things in your life feel like they're on fire, and this thing just broke down, and this person just missed your email, and then all of a sudden you're late, and and then your car stops working, right? That can become a source of frustration, or it can become extremely illuminating to where the patterns in your life are off. Maybe you're actually really overwhelmed. Maybe you actually have way too much on your plate. And the antidote, right, to the Mars and to the Jupiter is the Sagittarius side. It's taking a slow walk in nature. It's slowing down our thinking enough through practices like mindful breathing or meditation. It's having tools to reconnect us to our authentic self so that we're not in a place of fight or flight or reactivity, but we're actually coming from a centered, emotionally honest place and speaking truth about our own experience. And that's where a lot of our power lies in this transit, is that ability to recenter and harness ourselves and all that energy that we're working with.
I was just talking to a friend who is in a new relationship, and she's quite emotionally mature. And so she and this new person got into an argument, and he really wanted her to respond. He really wanted her to engage with the argument. And she was like, no, I need to take space. I want to make sure that I communicate with you in a responsible way. I don't want to hurt you. I want to make sure that I can find my truth so that I can speak from that place to you. Mm-hmm. And it sounds to me like that's going to be the kind of thing that we need to be very aware of. You brought in Sagittarius because it's the opposite of Gemini, correct? And
Correct.
So are you always looking at the axis to find the antidote? Is that kind of a go-to way that you interpret the energies?
Yes. And in particular, when we have the energy of a square in play, like the Mars square Saturn, Jupiter square Saturn, the angles that are not being activated by the square are as equally important to me as the ones that are being activated. They sort of hold the antidotes. And what's interesting about some of this Mars, some of the Mars square Saturn and some of the Mars transit is that Venus will be the other angle. She'll be in the sign of Virgo during some of that time. So she'll be ruled by Mercury. So she might bring some of that more. Okay, let me just look and take a real solid analysis of where I'm feeling stretched, frustrated, irritated by the conditions of my life, by the things that are happening around me, to me, in, wherever this is happening in your natal chart, and identify the places where what I've been thinking about hasn't been helpful to me, right? I was thinking about this last night as I was kind of going to sleep and had something just kind of recurring in my mind. And it helped me realize, oh, this is a place where I don't want my mind to go. Because when I allow my mind to go in this direction, it robs me of my peace. I don't get to sleep at night. I feel like this energy of frustration. So it brought me to, okay, well, what do I need to do on the other end of this to reclaim my peace, to restore my mind? What boundaries do I need to set? How do I need to take care of myself? What emotions do I need to feel, right? These are all different ways that we can access, right? Because Mars often comes with this energy, which often can lead to anger, right? Anger can be our leading course, in with the Mars energy, but there's always something underneath anger. That's really important to pay attention to. Our triggers never are determined by what they appear to be. They're always being dictated by what's underneath them. And we have to slow down in order to get to what's underneath them. Often not the easiest thing to do when there's a lot of momentum. Mars can have a lot of momentum energy. If your car is moving very quickly, its impact against something that's very solid can be very hard unless you've been consciously putting your foot on the brake and saying, okay, this is the pace that is good for me. And when we're talking about Mars and Gemini, right, there's infinite amounts of information, let's just say, in the universe. You could go down a rabbit hole researching anything on the Google machine, right? All it takes is going too far in that direction where you can actually lose the underlying intention that brought you to why you were doing what you were doing in the first place. And that's where I think the Jupiter element of like, what's the spiritual, what's the inner truth? What's the guidance that's guiding you to learn something, to do something, to experience something? Because with Mars and Gemini, there can be also a lot of options, so many things to explore, so many things to learn, so many things to do, so many conversations that need to be had, all these different things that it can literally mean an inertia of not doing anything, right? Having a lot more on our plate than what we can actually parse out and deal with right in front of us.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's going to be important to do this pausing. It's going to be important to go at a pace that feels like the right pace for you, and to not get swept up in the, activity of everything. With the Mercury retrograde, will that be a little bit easier to do? Because it seems like if we had Mars and Gemini without that retrograde, it would be very hard to do that. But I'm just wondering if that actually might help us slow down and reflect a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The Mercury retrograde goes from August 5th to August 28th. And so it's a 3-week period where from, Virgo back to Leo. And then, there's what I consider the shadow period before that, where Mercury is going through the sign. And then the shadow period afterwards, where Mercury is clearing the same degrees that it was retrograde in. And during that time, it becomes especially important for us to slow down and pay attention to the details. And it will be, I think, even more so as it's in the sign of Virgo, right? Virgo is very aware of details. And where we can make mistakes more often than not is by moving at our normal speed when those details get overlooked very easily. It's sort of like if your check engine light comes on and you're just sort of moving so quickly, if you had been paying attention, you would have noticed maybe the little sticker up in the corner of your window that said, get an oil change on this date, that you've already kind of gone beyond. Or you would have been more aware of the clinking noise in the engine. But by the time the check engine light comes on, or by the time you're on the side of the road waiting for somebody to come and tow your car, it's too late. If we are in a practice of awareness in our own life with these energies, then we can really say, okay, I do need to put my focus on these parts of my life and what they're calling for at this time. And that can really help you avoiding some of the, difficulties that come. Not to say that if they happen, I always believe that like Mercury retrograde can often be an intervention that actually helps you to resolve something that needed work already. And you're finally having to slow down enough to do it. So,
Okay. So where can people understand what area of life this is going to light up for them? How can they do that?
Well, we're going to focus on the Gemini relationship through the signs. But I can point out, at least from the mutable cross perspective and the fixed cross perspective, there will be extra activation with the retrograde. So the mutable cross is Gemini, Sagittarius, and Virgo, Pisces. And those are the most impacted by this whole transit because not only is Mercury retrograde in Virgo and Mars is transiting with, Jupiter in Gemini, but we have Saturn retrograde and Neptune retrograde in Pisces. So we're working with a lot of this retrograde energy just in that axis. And that's going to affect everyone where those houses land. And then the fixed cross, which is Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio, is also affected by this. They're affected by the Mercury retrograde in the Leo portion and by Pluto's retrograde in the Aquarius side. So I did try to emphasize those when I looked at the signs and how they're being impacted. But I always take into consideration the squares. So like Taurus and Scorpio are squared by Leo and Aquarius. So they're also kind of getting the energy of resolution. And that energy is going to help us resolve things in our life that haven't been working. Things that we've maybe been thinking about for months and months and not really getting a lot of traction on. Things in our life that have been calling us to more self-expression. And we finally have the energy to give ourselves to that self-expression. Great example of this would be like if you had the inspiration to write a book or to tell a short story or to start making videos on the internet or something, some way of capturing your own self-expression. These transits might really fuel that and encourage that, but then also help you over the course of the Mars transit to refine, right? Mars doesn't necessarily have skill. Saturn has skill. Jupiter doesn't necessarily have skill either. It brings the opportunity, right? So you get this opportunity to be seen, to express, but then from that, you learn how to edit, how to refine, how to really get into contact with what did I want to say? Well, what was the intention that I had behind these words? And if we want our words to make an impact in the world, we'll really be looking to see, are the things that I'm saying motivating and inspiring to myself and to others? Does it demonstrate the courage that I have and the heart and the strength that I have? Does it really reflect my true character, or are they just words, right? So these are things to think about.
You just gave me a new goal, a new timeline. So I am in the process of writing a book.
Oh, that's
and I was hoping that I would be in the editing phase by around the timeline that you're talking about. So this is perfect. Thank you. This is the thing about astrology is that sometimes, and I don't know if all of you have experienced this, but I might not even be aware of a certain transit, but there is a desire within me that I'm answering. And then retrospectively, when I look at the astrology, it's like, oh my God, of course, like this is amazing. It's oftentimes textbook.
Oh yeah.
Amazing, right? Like it's just so right on.
Two thoughts to that. If I were taking this, because the Mercury retrograde is in two different signs, if I were doing what you were doing, the first thing I would do is in the Leo part of the retrograde, I would read the book aloud to myself.
Okay.
To others, maybe as a way to get feedback, but really to feel the energy of the words and the stories. And then in the Virgo portion of the retrograde, I would edit it or find a professional editor to look through it with a critical eye, right?
Oh, yes.
So it's two different energies that we're working with during those times, just to keep it.
Well, thank you. That's just a little impromptu reading and advice there. I love it. Okay, we're going to go into the by sign breakdown.
Right.
Next, before we do that, If you have not yet signed up for our Cosmic Insider, it's free. It's our weekly newsletter. You get tips on the astrology of the week ahead. You get insider exclusives. You get all kinds of little goodies as part of that newsletter. We're also doing a raffle once a month. So if you're on the Cosmic Insider list, if you subscribe to that, you will be entered into a chance to win a mastery class, a course, a membership with us in the inner circle. There's all kinds of little prizes. So if you're not yet a Cosmic Insider, head on over to astrologyhub.com/insider, get on that weekly newsletter, get submitted automatically into the raffle. If you're already on that list, you're already in. So we're going to be choosing winners once a month, and we'll be announcing them in the Cosmic Insider and on the podcast. So stay tuned. All right, so let's go. Are we going to start with Aries?
Yes, we are. We'll
Okay.
kick it off with Aries.
Walk us through it.
All right. So with Aries, there's a big focus on Aries in our personal purpose and individuation, right? And Mars in Gemini is key to bringing that focus to your communication patterns, to your local conversations, to people in your neighborhood. And a part of this, when you're on the path to discovering purpose, one of the first things, right, you first feel a sense of like, oh, this is what my purpose is. And then individuation is when you start to do that. But how it affects people around you is what propels that. So looking at whether you feel curious, inspired, and propelled by your own ideas or overwhelmed by the amount of options. If there are too many options on the table, start to just simplify. In this case, less is more, right? They say we can't really choose from more than 3 different things, especially if you have children like toddlers. Don't give them more choices. Give them 2 very specific choices. And if you're looking at this for yourself and your own calling and what you feel a sense of purpose behind, focus on the one that makes you feel like you can develop stamina, because that's the real test of, am I going to be able to stick with this long term, right? It might sound great to run a marathon, but you have to really develop over time the ability to run 13 miles. Do you really want to do that? Will it feel at the end like you've achieved something that is lasting and meaningful to your overall personal purpose? These are the questions to ask.
Okay. And just backing up one sec.
Mm-hmm.
They're listening for their sun, and they're listening for any strong placement in their chart. So if they have like a stellium in something, or they have a major conjunction in something, they're going to listen for that too. Yes?
Yeah. I wrote a lot of these from the perspective of the rising sign. So Aries rising would be Aries on the first house.
Got it. Okay.
Sun in Aries, and then I tried to look at where the Gemini transit was taking place. But when you have strong Aries placements, like if you have the North Node in Aries, or if you have Mars in Aries, you're having that relationship between Mars, who's the ruler of Aries, and its transit through the sign of Gemini. So there will be resonance, I'm sure, on some level, especially if you have strong archetypes at play that are in Aries.
Okay.
So Taurus, focusing right now for the sign of Taurus, or strong placements in Taurus rising, on clarifying the values and ideas that you're working on and making sure that they are really aligned with the actual desires that you have. Mars' bottom line is about our desire. What do I will? What do I want? And Taurus is also a sign that's very strongly oriented to our desires, physical desires. We're talking about Venus desires in Taurus, but physical security, financial security. In this Mars transit, this is a really good time to be looking at whether those desires are actually lining up with the energy that you have to give to them. So is the desire actually about working to make more money, or is it about having more freedom? If we believe that money equals more freedom, we might think that working more will give us more freedom. But in the Gemini perspective, we might be able to see other options that are different from these two paths. And the two options might actually shift you into being able to achieve something that you're really valuing by deciding what you value more, your time or your money or something entirely different. Maybe it's relationship that you value more and you realize you're working harder for more money because you think it'll mean more security. But when you tune into your heart, you actually really want to slow down and spend more time in your relationships. These are all things that I think this transit can help bring a lot of clarity to. If you are Gemini, Gemini rising, Gemini sun, or Venus, or like I have a Gemini moon, so if you can't tell, expect this energy to kick off a year of expansion in your life, especially when we get to that Mars-Jupiter conjunction. And if you felt conflict, and especially the conflict of divergent desires, similar to what I was talking about for Taurus, this time might help you get really clear on what is it that you want to be doing. There's a saying that came up when I was thinking about Gemini: energy goes where attention flows. So as we're working with that, we might actually simplify our schedules, our relationships, our stuff, all the different things where energy goes. One of the things I was thinking about is like, there's these toys that are in my house that I'm always spending a lot of time and energy, picking up. And no matter what, it draws this frustration and irritation out of me when I'm doing that. One way of handling that, where you notice like something that's drawing your energy that brings a lot of friction, is to say, well, what is this trying to show me? What adjustment do I need to make in my life? What limitation am I hitting that I actually have the power and the ability to make a decision for myself that will help to redirect my energy? So hopefully that's helpful for you, Gemini. This can be a big year where there's, especially with Jupiter, a lot of opportunities, and where we have too much opportunity and not enough energy to actually nourish those opportunities, they can easily dissipate, like dust in the wind. And what we'll want to do is put our focus and attention on the ones that are really impactful, the ones that inspire and motivate you towards your dream life, towards what you desire most deeply. Cancer has been working on for a long time now on letting go of old patterns as it relates to home and family. And this Mars transit might trigger the awareness of anger and limitations, especially things that related to feeling unsafe as a child at home. So a part of what this transit can offer you is ways to work on these deeper triggers and resolve these patterns, because ultimately what's been trying to happen is a new cycle to start in your private life. But we have to deal with, in order for something truly new to take root in our lives, we have to deal with the sort of most ancient parts of us that feel insecure, afraid that we're not going to have the safety and security that maybe we've never had in our life. So if there's patterns of chaos or patterns of loss or disappointment or things that we've been really struggling with over the years, especially in our relationships, but just in the things that people don't see. When I talk about the private life, I'm talking about that part of you that most people on a day-to-day basis don't know is part of your inner narrative. But when you start working on those parts, giving them care and attention, speaking differently to yourself, it makes a huge difference. So, Leo, this time is about the expansion of your hopes and dreams in the world. And this comes through the ways in which we grow connections to groups of people that inspire you and support your creative expansion. It's time to bring in the balance of the abundance of social connection and the need for personal time and integration. And I would especially recommend using the Mercury retrograde period during the Leo season, right? It's from August 5th to August 28th to slow down and reconnect with yourself, right? One of the things that I'm doing during that time is going to a women's nature gathering. It's like 4 days of camping in the wilderness called Temple of Belonging. And it's all about women coming together, supporting each other to be nourished. And it's one of the only gatherings that I've ever seen of this kind that has 4 days of childcare, right? So that you can do self-care and you can take care of yourself and you can do classes and you can learn new things. Like, this is an incredible example of doing that and having the balance of social connection and personal integration. So that's what I'm doing for myself. Maybe find something in your life that allows you to access those deeper creative places, the joy, the expressiveness of a child, and also the quiet, simple time of just being with oneself at the same time. Virgo, you are no stranger to hard work and refinement, but during this transit, it's especially important for you to dot your I's and cross your T's, because our propensity to make mistakes during this kind of energy, to move too quickly and overlook something, an important detail, missing a signature on a contract that then we miss the deadline for submission because we didn't have all the things, submitted in time, making a mistake on accounting or tax form, things like that. But it's also because it's easy to get confused, cross our wires, and that energy can take a drain on your health. So one way to slow oneself down and be able to be really mindful and focused on what needs to be attended to during this transit is to focus on your health management. If you have a really solid routine of how you take care of your body from like when you wake up in the morning till you go to bed at night, and this can be the kind of transit where if you're trying to get motivated to develop a work career balance routine, you can actually do that kind of by tripping over your own mistakes in a way. Maybe you get exhausted and need to take a little bit of downtime. And then all of a sudden you realize, wow, I really need to get up every day and do a little bit of breath work and a meditation and then go for a run. And then I need to be fueling my body, not with caffeine, but with nourishing foods. A lot of the purification energy would be otherwise directed towards self-doubt, self-criticism, right? So being able to do the things that help you manage your mental energy and keep yourself focused on what you're doing right. Because I'm sure with how hard you work, you are absolutely doing something right every single day. So find that. Libra has been learning about their needs, and especially their needs in relationship, how that has been challenged by past relationships. A lot of what we learn about our needs from childhood has more to do with suppressing our needs than it has to do with actually expressing our needs and understanding how to get those needs met in relationship. And a part of what Libra's been learning is about the higher calling of their life. And that higher calling, whether it's a spiritual calling, whether it's more study that you need to do, it might start to really take precedence. Sometimes we have to set aside all the other things. People are really good at being needed by other people. We can often create dependencies in relationship, but when a higher calling comes through for the soul, that's the time when we are being asked literally to shed those dependencies to follow a path that we don't know where it leads. when you're following that, you can go through a big period of personal growth. And the bridge to that higher calling is learning what we call the spiritual lesson in all of this, right? That's the deeper meaning or purpose of what suffering or struggling in relationships, loss or challenges that we might have been going through, difficulties in our own evolutionary journey. Going forward means crossing that bridge from it being a personal lesson to it being a social lesson. And this is where I think you've finally gotten to a point of mastery in your own self-learning that you have something to share with the world. And if you do, and if you have that calling, this might be a time where you get started. Scorpio, this transit might bring new horizons, whether it's in the bedroom or in all the places where we experience intimacy. This includes the resources that we share with others. Scorpio is about attachment and bonding and transformation. And these relationships, which have been our core source of connection, are also the places where we're going to get to learn how to expand following the impulse of what we desire and to act in integrity with our higher self, right? To act without integrity is often to hurt people and to make a lot of mistakes that can lead to whether it's shame or guilt or, whatever the inner experience is. A part of Scorpio healing that is having the emotional honesty to bring forward and speak about desires, but also to be in a place of looking constantly at how we can act in integrity. And integrity, I just think of that word as meaning wholeness. It's really thinking of ourselves as a whole being and as connected to others as whole beings. And when we're connected as a whole being to our higher self, the actions that we want to take, even if they are coming from these strong desires, will be respective of the impact that that has on others. Sagittarius, you are expanding in the realm of relationship. And this has to emerge authentically. It's not something that you can think your way into relationship with others. It's more the other way around. It's Sagittarius learning how to trust their intuitive thinking and the desires that they have to connect with others from a place of curiosity and open-mindedness. And this leading to a relationship that is expanding you into new horizons, helping you to change patterns in relationships, or even an existing relationship where all of a sudden new frontiers of relating are available because of that emotional honesty. You're more than likely just doing this because there is a deep desire for freedom, but freedom also comes in commitment. And so the journey is this way of resolving where you're healing things from the past and stepping in more and more to the truth of where you're called to be in relationship. Capricorn, you are focused on changing up your day-to-day routines and rhythms. This can also include expansion in your creative life, your romantic life, and with your children. One of the most important things is managing this energy. It'll help you establish a better relationship with your resources of time, money, and investment. And a part of why this is so important is Capricorn is so resilient and can do so much, right? And that Jupiter energy and the Mars energy can really expand. Like, oh my God, I have so much creative energy. I have so much, I would call it eros or life force that's ready to do things in the world. And then you have to really learn how to harness that in the thing that is going to be most self-respecting to your long-term vision, long-term views of what you desire for yourself, and also in respect to the things that you're still healing. There may be things, especially with this Saturn retrograde, that you've been working a long time on healing and having boundaries around your time and money and resources, and in particular around your creative energy and creative life is going to give you permission to be able to invest more of yourself without the fear of becoming lost in something that's going to take too much of you. Aquarius, Pluto has been working on your own personal evolution. You're in the very beginning stages of what is a 20-year journey with Pluto. But this is happening. This entire Pluto transit is about your self-expression, right? This is a development of authentic self-expression, joyful self-expression. And a part of that is working through our shadow material, the places where we feel alienated, disconnected, and not belonging in the world that maybe isn't quite ready for us. This is a powerful time to begin experimenting with different creative practices and forms of expression that bring you more and more into your authentic self. The more you do that, and the more you feel the resonance of how deeply you do belong in this world and how much of an impact your creative energy and life force has on this world, the more you will begin to really harness that Pluto power. With Pluto moving through Aquarius, you're going to get to see the power of the collective and the power of the individual, all from within yourself. And so this is really about tending to the true and authentic expression of your individual power. Pisces, you have been working on integrations of the Saturn lessons of this past year. If this has been about healing from deeper pain, suffering, and struggle in your life, if you've been struggling to let go, this Mars transit may accelerate some of the closure and help you bring clarity and fresh perspective after completing some necessary communication. I really can't emphasize enough, and everyone has Pisces somewhere in their chart. If there are things that are unhealed, unforgiven, or things that you have continuously suffered with over the last, year and a half, 2 years, especially, this is the time to resolve these things. And, forgiveness as a practice can resolve so much. Sometimes what forgiveness can't resolve, compassion can help bring us closer to. It's really, from the deeper, my own deeper perspective about all the signs and all the souls is that we're on a healing journey. And when we've constantly had a source of struggle or suffering in our life, whether we might be able to, attach it to this experience or this illness or this job situation or this relationship, it all comes down to our deeper relationship to ourselves. And sometimes the first step that we have to take in that is just acknowledging, I don't want to suffer anymore, and forgiving ourselves for struggling so much. And then recognizing that a healed version of ourselves does exist in time and space somewhere. Maybe we're not there yet, but I really do think that this Mars transit can help us get a mental perspective about the past that is strong enough and clear enough for us to say, okay, I'm done with that. And maybe you have even some sort of closing ceremony that you do during this time, especially around that Mars Saturn square, if there's got to be a new moon around there. But anyway, I always like in the dark time of the moon, in the balsamic phase, which is kind of like the Pisces time of the phase. I like to just clear things out, let things go, cry, clear my home, clean my home, get rid of old letters, get rid of old stuff. That's the time to really acknowledge, like, you have a lot of creative, inspirational potential in this world. And it's going to come through you being healed and whole instead of holding on to what you've been trying to heal. So I encourage you to bring completion, and especially through communicating. And if you can't talk to the person in person that you need to communicate with, maybe writing them a letter, burning it, and letting the ashes flow down the river might be enough. All right. That's all
Wow.
of our signs.
Cool. I don't know about all of you, but I just felt like Michelle was speaking right to my soul. Like that was incredible, Michelle. I don't know. How did you feel doing that? Because that just felt like you were way in the zone and just like literally
so beautiful
downloading.
to hear that. I was praying on these and working on these the last couple of days, just really trying to feel what it feels like for each of the signs. So I hope that something in this resonates.
You did an incredible job. Like please let us know in the chat if you had that same experience I just had. I was like, dang. And I was listening for the people in my life too. Like, wow, that just feels right on. That's not easy to do. I know that. Like, there's actually some astrologers we work with who won't do that because it can be so challenging. And so the fact that you just did that in such a beautiful way is amazing. Wow, Michelle, thank you. Okay, if you liked it and you're like, I want Michelle to look at my chart. I want to have a reading with her. I want to get her perspective on this transit or anything that you're navigating in your life. I highly recommend her for readings. As I said in the beginning, I've had many readings with Michelle. She is just as compassionate and intuitive and tuned in and helpful as we just experienced going through all the zodiac signs. So you can connect with her on our Astrologer Connect, astrologyhub.com/connect. And she does offer a 10% off reading for our community. So you can enter AH perks in all caps and get 10% off your reading with Michelle. She's amazing. And I hope that you have the opportunity to connect with her. I gifted myself a reading with her on my birthday a couple years ago, and I still have like golden nuggets that I carry from that reading with me. Okay. Any final thoughts for us as we enter into this portal of Mars into Gemini? Any other things that you want to leave us with? You've given us so much already, but anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I wanted to say a couple of things. Impulsiveness is always an issue with Mars. And, it's not necessarily that the impulse is wrong. It's that we have to learn how to navigate with that. And so I think I talked a little bit about how much important the emphasis around communication, being watchful of being sharp of tongue, with Mars also ruling Mercury. This is a strong emphasis during this retrograde cycle. And I think Mercury always gives us hints. So if we're paying attention, the 3 weeks before and the 3 weeks after that, August 5th to 28th, keep in mind that this is here to help you resolve things from the past, because Mars is also here to help you move forward. And these are the ways that we move forward. All of a sudden, when something inside of us, especially when our way of thinking about ourselves or our life breaks down and is no longer working, it means that we have to evolve, right? And Mars is the leading edge of evolution, right? So this is meant to help us change our thinking. It's meant to help us introduce new ideas. It's meant to help us experiment. And what we have to learn how to do is to stay grounded in ourselves, in our sort of anchor point, and what you're actually willing to do and commit to long term with your energy. That is, I think, the key to making the most out of both the Mars and the Jupiter transit, right? So that piece is, I think, most important in everything that I've shared. And yeah.
Well, there you go. The golden nugget right at the end. So thank you, Michelle, so much for being here. That was such a pleasure. I feel very, very equipped for this transit, both in terms of what potential pitfalls are and how to mitigate those, but then also where the opportunities are and where to really focus the energy as we're moving through this transit. So thank you for that. Thanks to all of you for being here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being curious and for being interested in astrology and applying it in your life. If you have any comments, please put them in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast, we love to hear from you. Also, you can always email us at support@astrologyhub.com. You can just send a few thoughts about any podcast episodes. We love to hear from you. So thank you very much for being a part of our community. Thank you for making astrology a part of your life. We will look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.